Hello, and welcome back to Klik TV Online. Here we talk to business leaders and discuss the ways they leverage technology for business success. My name is Brooke, also known as Tech Barbie, and my guest today is Charinna Kushnir, who is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Alliances at Data Canopy. Welcome, Charinna. It's so nice to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk to you about being a woman leader in business. And I can't think of a better time to do that than at the start of Women's History Month.
Thank you, Brooke. It's great to be with you first thing on a Monday morning.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right into some questions that I have prepared for you.
Awesome.
First up, what unique perspective or skills do you bring to your role as Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Alliances at Data Canopy?
I love this question so much because I think that there are so many different ways that somebody who has worked in technology as long as I have, which is now almost 20 years, can answer this. And I would say that my unique perspective really centers around the relationships that I have built. So when I started in tech 20 years ago, I started actually selling phone systems, which is a pretty far divestiture from what I do today. And I was really determined in my early 20s, unlike my colleagues who were out there, beating the streets and knocking on doors. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to figure out how to build a network of people that bring me opportunity rather than me having to do cold calling. And I'm proud to say in my 20-year career, I've never actually made a cold call. So if somebody asked me how to do that, I would be remiss how to answer that question. And it's because a lot of people in sales, that's how they built their books of business. I built my book of business and my career on my relationships that I developed. And those relationships grew and continue actually to be relationships that I engage in today, even 20 years later. And I consider myself extremely lucky that that's the way that I've grown my business and that it has brought a very unique perspective to what I do today. And I run a team of people and I tell all of them, you have to build solid relationships because that is what our business is predicated on. If you don't have a solid relationship, you're not going to be able to have a successful business relationship.
Absolutely. No, that totally makes sense. Now, my next question for you is, how have your skills working in sales and communications contributed to your success in the cloud computing industry?
So it's a very far divestiture away from what I sold for the majority of my career. So I spent most of my career working on the voice side of the business. And then I crossed over to what I endearingly call the dark side, which is the data side of the house. And I have been really, really lucky in my career, Brooke, to always be able to see what I deem to be the writing on the wall. And what I saw was that the voice business was starting to deteriorate and it was slowly becoming a race to zero. And the data side of the house, the data center side of the house, the cloud migration side of the house, especially post-COVID, was growing exponentially. So I wanted to take everything that I had learned on the voice side, all the relationships that I had developed in my career, and I wanted to translate those over into what I do today. And then I've taken that a step further now, obviously, because I've grown a team of people who actually have grown that even threefold from where I've been, and been able to really leverage that into the space that we're in today.
Yeah. So it kind of circles back to that original topic of relationships. You're going to need to know how to communicate with people and you're going to need to know how to bring people together no matter what industry you work in. So having those relationships at the center of everything you do, I think it definitely makes sense why that's led to so much success in your career thus far. What strategies do you employ to identify new business opportunities and drive revenue growth in the cloud solutions space?
So I am a subscriber to the Challenger sales model, if you're familiar with Challenger. And that's the way that I teach my team how to approach sales. So it's all about creating value for that partner and that customer. A price-free piece of paper, Brooke, is not a value. that is a commodity. That is not how I train my team. That's not how I approach it myself. My job is to understand the pain points that customer has and then provide that customer with a solution. There's lots of different models of sales. There are a million books out there, right? I mean, we've all
Right.
And what I love about Challenger is that it's listen first and talk later, right? So when I teach my team how to approach a brand new partner, I say, first, let that partner speak. Let them tell you what their business model is. Let them tell you what their approach is. And then you're going to tailor your responses and your presentation to the way that they do business, not the other way around. When you get to the point where you're engaged with a client, it's the same thing, bro. You're going to listen to everything that pains them, right? And then you're going to create a solution and say, well, you told me you have the following pain points. Let me how our solution is going to solve those pain points for you. And the price is always the last thing because we don't want to sell on price, Brooke. We want to sell on value and solution. Really carried me through my sales career. And it's the way that, again, that I teach the team that works with me. And it really creates a higher value. You know, I was talking to one of the salespeople on our team last week, and we have a partner who's really just pushing us for a price. And I'm like, if they're not willing to spend 5 minutes on the phone discussing what their customer's looking for, they're not our partner. They're not right. They're not aligned. And so that's just somebody who needs 3 quotes, Brooke, and just wants to toss us in the mix. We don't have time for that stuff. There's this massive push right now in the data center space because of AI. And there's a lot of buzz around what's going on with the AI market. And they're taking data center space at what I almost call alarming rates, Brooke. Something that we've really never seen in all the years in data centers. And during COVID, we had this hard shift to the cloud. And now AI is bringing it hard shift back to the data center. So we're just trying to keep up with demand at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine that if you came into one of those meetings, dead set on selling exactly what you've prepared beforehand, and you don't do that listening step, and you don't take into account what the new client or potential new client's goals are, what their challenges are. Are they going into the cloud direction? Are they looking more to go into a data center approach? Like things are different for every person, and there's no one size fits all solution, it sounds like. So I think approaching the sales component of your work in that matter makes a lot of sense to me. Would you mind sharing a pivotal moment or experience in your career that you feel has really shaped you as a female leader?
This is literally my favorite question because I get this question a lot. And so I literally love this question because it gives me the opportunity to tell a story that I hope resonates with a lot of young people who are getting into any kind of business as they're getting out of college and looking at their careers. When I graduated from college, I went to work in the .com bubble, as we called it, right? Because in the 90s, that's pretty much when you graduated from college, everybody went to work for a .com company. And I had the good fortune of working for a person named Lisa Junker, who is still my mentor, my friend, my colleague, my inspiration. And I was in my early 20s, right? And we're easily shaped and molded at that age by the people that we interact with. Mm-hmm. And I remember showing up for work at 9 o'clock in the morning, Brooke, and I would leave at 5. And she let that go on for about a week. And then she pulled me to the side and she says, you know that doesn't make you a hero, that you're coming in at 9 and leaving at 5. Right?
Well, a dot.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you have to put in the time, Charinna. You have to go the extra mile. And in that moment, my work ethic completely shifted, completely as a human being, and has continued to throughout my career. I believe that what you put in, Brooke, is what you get out. And sales is not a 9 to 5 job. by any means or stretch of the imagination. It's literally the hardest job to do if you want to make any money. Now, if you don't want to make money, it's a really easy job. Right? But if you want to make money, you got to put into the time. You got to put in the effort. You got to pick up every phone call. You've got to answer every email within an hour. And Lisa taught me that level of work ethic is what gets you to the next level, both in your career and financially. And I teach that to every single person. And when I interview people, Brooke, I ask them, like, what, if you had to categorize sales, would you categorize it as 9 to 5 or 8 to 6? And people who tell me it's a 9 to 5 job, Brooke, are not the ones that I hire.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that is the work ethic that I can get down with.
Yeah, I have a question, a follow-up question to that. Do you feel like, since we're on the topic of, Women's History Month and being a female leader, do you feel like your male counterparts had the same expectation to, have that really, really strong work ethic? Like, do you feel like that was the same across the board for everyone? Or did you feel like, there was more eyes on you and you needed to push harder, especially at the beginning of your career, and maybe particularly because you were a woman in the field?
Brooke, that's such an awesome question. And truthfully, I don't know that I ever paid attention is the answer. I was so heads down on my own success that I don't think I paid attention to even what they were doing or what was around me at that moment.
Worried about it.
I wasn't worried about it.
Yeah.
I was like, I have to do what I need to do to be successful and move up the ladder. And my male counterparts, they can either get on board or get out of the way as far as I was concerned back then.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's still the way I feel about it. I'm like, get on board or get out of the way. Yeah. I was recently at a convention, and I was sitting and having lunch with one of my partners, and excuse the arrogance of this commentary, Brooke, but like, how many other meetings are you taking? And I said, none. I said, you guys are literally the only meeting that I'm taking. Everything else is like pre-planned events. And he said, oh, really? Why is that? And I said, because if you don't know me, that's not my problem. That's yours. I'm like, 20 years of doing this, it's a privilege to do business with me.
Yes.
See? That's not my problem, Brooke.
Yes. And that confidence, like, I don't even really think that is necessarily arrogance as much as it's confidence in saying, I know my worth. I've put in the time, I've put in the years, I've put in the work and the hours and all of that stuff to prove that you know what you're doing, to prove that you know your business. And if anybody else can't already recognize that from all the work that you've shown, then, what was it? Get with the program or get out of the way. Totally. Now looking ahead, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of women in leadership?
So this year, I really got focused on that. And I don't know that I have really been focused on mentorship and empowering young women coming into this business as I am right now, because I'm at that point in my career where I can actually stop, take a breath, and start figuring out what I can do to make that next generation interested in this business. The reality, Brooke, is that this has always been a male-dominated industry. I always say that it's really funny that it's the one place that we can go to conventions where there's a line for the restroom for the men and not for the women.
That's
but true, right? Like, you go to a convention, you see it, and it's like, you compare it to what we see when we go to a concert, it's very different, right? Mm-hmm. So this year I became involved with an organization called the Executive Evolution, and I am actually the head of fundraising for that organization. And we are solely focused on teaching the younger girls how to rotate in this business successfully, but also empowering them not to put up with some of the things that we did when we first got into this industry. Because there's a certain level of arrogance from some of our counterparts out there that we don't want the younger generation to have to face. And we are teaching them to empower themselves not to have to do that, and to learn, and to how to climb the corporate ladder, and how to become an equity partner in a company. How do we do those things? How do we make sure we're getting to the next step? And how do we say no, Brooke, to the things that don't make us comfortable as human beings?
Yeah.
That's not okay. That behavior, it's not okay.
It's not going to work for me.
It's not going to work. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine a few weeks ago, and he and I have known each other for a very long time. And he crossed the line in the conversation with me. And I stewed Brooke about it for a little bit. And then I thought, what would the younger version of myself, how would I see it versus where I am today in my career as an executive of a company?
Right.
And I sent him a message and I said, we're really good friends, but don't ever talk to me like that again. Not okay.
No.
I want to make sure that the women that are coming up in tech now never feel, Brooke, like they have to tolerate that kind of behavior. Ever.
Right.
Ever. It's not okay.
Right. No, it's not. And I think that as a culture, as a society, I think we are moving towards a time where a lot of more women, instead of just, preaching tolerance and preaching just, boys will be boys and we're just gonna, put our heads down and shrink ourselves to defy that and say, no, this is what's right. A man would not put up with being treated this way. So why would I? And I think that instilling that in the young women who are coming up in this business is crucial, and having women like yourself that they can look up to, see themselves in, aspire to be, is also hugely motivating because, when you see another woman doing it, even if it is a male-dominated field, that's that hope right there, and that's something that they can imagine for themselves, which I think is huge and super important. Charinna, thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me. Thank you for your time. It was so great to talk to you today.
Thank you, Brooke, so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Until next time, thank you for watching Klik TV Online.